Hi, and welcome to today's episode of Daily Musings. I am Allysia, and today we are going to talk about being your own best friend, which is a very cheesy sounding topic. It sounds like we're about to get into this emotional rah-rah hug yourself session, self-esteem boosting workshop or something like that. But cheesy as it may sound, it's something that I've been playing around with in my mind. It's a little bit of a frame or a lens, you could say, that I've been wearing for the last couple weeks, and it's been kind of fun. So the whole idea is that we tend to be the meanest to the people that we're closest to. It's like we can be these perfect people to strangers, and we're like kind to our acquaintances. And then as you get closer down the inner circle, like maybe siblings or parents or significant others or children, that's when we can be really cruel sometimes. And then even more so when it comes to ourselves. It's one of those weird facts of life, right? The more comfortable you are with someone, the more comfortable you are being just totally just off the wall to them. So yeah, no one more so than yourself, because you're closer to yourself than you are to anyone else. So there is only one you, but sometimes when you're doing anything, there's another you who's kind of watching everything happen. So sometimes I find it useful to split the experience of self a little bit to the me who is speaking to you and doing things and going about my life, and then the me who's thinking about it or observing it. And that me in the background who's thinking and observing is the jerk. That person can be just such a jerk sometimes, basically telling me things how I messed this up again and I did this wrong, and it can be a little bit of a drill sergeant back there. So I've been playing around with that. I'm like, what if I reversed it? I know that this negative drill sergeant in the back of my mind, I'm not consciously choosing it to be there, but yet it's there. And it doesn't seem to be making my life any better. It seems to basically just make me miserable sometimes. So what if I just pretended that was totally shifted? What if instead of having this really negative relationship with myself, or I have this kind of grumpy person in the background, what if I switched it and pretended it was my best friend? Because I think just simply framing your relationship with yourself as if it was a relationship with a best friend puts everything into perspective. So for example, we're really mean to ourselves. So that we'll say things like, if we make a mistake, we embarrass ourselves, we'll replay the incident over and over and over, and then we'll just be in this loop of self-punishment where it's oh, you're such an idiot, I can't believe you did that. Whereas if your best friend did the same thing, you would probably maybe try to make jokes with them to add levity. You wouldn't think they were a terrible person. You might be a little bit oh man, how did that happen? But you wouldn't seriously be harsh to them. At least I hope so. You wouldn't be mean to your best friend. So just something to think about, because I think that ultimately it's this idea of punishment that causes me the most problems. If I make a mistake, then I believe that I must be punished and I must suffer, because that's otherwise how will I learn? But this whole premise rests on the idea that I believe myself to be a bad person who does bad things. If your fundamental belief about people is that people are basically good and make mistakes sometimes, then the use of punishment is really less relevant, because punishment is assuming that, okay, the only way I'm going to be able to keep you in line is if you suffer for your mistakes, because otherwise, how are you going to know? How are you going to know what's good or bad? Whereas if you assume you're fundamentally good, you don't really need punishments in the same way. So, and that's a whole other thing to get into, and something that I think about a lot when talking about parenting and things like that. But actually, to use parenting for an example, to bring it to the best friend thing, if I think about if my child forgot her, I don't know, I'm just going to make something up. Say I went to a restaurant with her and she forgot a hat at the restaurant, and then I find out about it and we're driving back and I realize she's forgotten her hat. I might start drilling into her oh, I can't believe you forgot your hat. Come on, are we serious? Because there's this sort of almost fundamental understanding that kids are just gonna make mistakes all the time. So you relate to them when they make mistakes as oh, of course you made a mistake again, because you're a kid and kids do this. Whereas if it was your best friend who forgot their hat, you wouldn't be frustrated in the same way. You might kind of just be give them your hat and say, you forgot your hat, as opposed to making it this whole narrative about how they forget everything all the time, or they're always making mistakes or something like that. So I think we do that with ourselves as well, because even though that's a parenting example, it's like we're really little babies inside. Like all of us, every human is basically just like big baby in some way. So with ourselves, I think we can sometimes think like, oh, I can't believe you made that mistake. You did it again. Stupid. Whereas if it was our best friend, we'd just be like, hey, here's the hat. It's not a big deal. So it's this this compassion that I've been thinking about. This even, I don't know if any of you guys have had this experience, but when you wake up in the morning and immediately upon waking up, you're thinking about all the things that you have to deal with and all the things that are on your plate. And then maybe you start getting into this loop about like, oh man, if I don't do this right, then I'm going to feel this way. Or like you're already judging yourself as you're laying in bed. You haven't even gotten out of bed. You're already like in this loop of basically like self-judgment. Maybe you're thinking like, oh, I'm so lazy. I slept in a little bit. Or, oh, I really don't want to do that thing. I never get anything done. Or you're like within minutes, you're already in this negative loop right when you wake up. So I was thinking about that because this doesn't happen to me all the time, but it does happen to me sometimes. So I was thinking about it. What if I woke up and instead my really negative mind in the back said something along the lines of like, good morning, sunshine. It's another day. Like, it's just like, I don't know, if you had a sleepover with your best friend, it's sort of like, what would that energy be like first thing in the morning? And it's amazing how big it sounds. So cheesy, I know that, but it actually like does something. It actually makes a little bit of a difference. Just going about my day, observing random negative things that happen, things that annoy me, traffic jams out of nowhere or whatever. If you can kind of keep this best friend in the back of your head as opposed to this like drill sergeant, then all of a sudden those experiences become less dramatic and you're less likely to blow them out of proportion. It's easier to keep a sense of humor, a sense of levity about things. So I've been finding that that really useful. And another way that this can manifest is if you're suffering, if you're in pain because of something. Maybe you slipped on a banana peel in front of everyone and you're really, really embarrassed about it. And you're like, oh, I can't believe I slipped on that banana peel. That's so embarrassing. And you're in this self-punishment mode. One way that you could twist that for yourself is to be compassionate. Like, how would you comfort a best friend in that situation? It's like, oh man, that must have really hurt. Like, you must feel like so sore now. You hit your head, that must have really hurt. And yeah, like slipping in front of all these people, oh man, like I'm really sorry, like that just sucks, let me give you a hug, as opposed to like this berating that maybe some of us are more apt to do. So that's just like another thing. And one more thought I want to share on this matter is that we think that we have to toughen ourselves up, I think, by tearing ourselves down. So if we think that we practice this compassion on ourselves and we're like, oh man, that must have been a terrible fall, I hope you're okay, like give me a hug kind of thing with ourselves, that we're gonna just make mistakes all over the place and we're gonna just become these insufferable people who are just jerks to everyone because we're not being held in line by our self-punishment. And again, this all rests on the belief that we're bad people who need correction, not that we are good people who sometimes make mistakes. So it's just something to keep in mind, this idea that if we don't punish ourselves, we're not going to learn our lesson. Is that actually true? Or is that just a kind of a warped perception on reality? Would it in fact be better, and this is probably how you'd approach it with a best friend, if instead of tearing yourself down when you make a mistake, you instead lifted yourself up and connected yourself to the human experience? Because in fact, everyone makes mistakes and that's a part of life. So that's just my thought today. The switching the belief that maybe instead of, that's some loud beeping outside, it's like a tractor or something like that, but you are not fundamentally this broken bad person who needs to be punished, to be kept in line. This idea that maybe as you would treat your best friend, you're like basically a good person who forgets their hats in restaurants sometimes. The benefits of kind of transforming that narrative in the back of your head, the negative self-critic, to perhaps a best friend. I'll catch up with you guys in the next one.